Welcome, everyone, whether you're joining now or watching this later. My name is Brianna Hernandez. I'm Director of Curation here at Ma's House. Very excited to share this night with you and introduce our featured guests who are exhibiting in our gallery space right now. We are sharing the exhibition Beyond Grief, Snapshots of Life After Loss in collaboration with Luna Peak Foundation, who you'll hear from in just a moment. But before we get started, I just wanted to give a really warm thank you to our sponsors for this show. We had both an anonymous donor give towards this exhibition in support of its mission, which is to really create a broader and open conversation on loss. And we also had a sponsorship from Brockett Funeral Home here in Southampton. So thank you for your generous support of this exhibition and bringing it that healing aspect to people through shows like this. This exhibition is featuring several portraits, stories, and mementos featured in the Beyond Grief book. And you'll get to learn a little bit more about what went into that in just a moment. We also wanted to just remind you all of the dates of the exhibition. The show is on view now through March 25th, and it's open by appointment as well as during any of our special events. And we have weekly workshops. So if you come a little early to a workshop, or if you take a little break from whatever you're working on, you can check out the show. But also our featured guests will be here on March 17th in person to lead a workshop both in the space as well as hybrid streamed on Zoom. So make sure to check all those out in the newsletter and on Instagram. But without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to the co-founders of Luna Peak Foundation. They will be sharing more about their amazing work in the cancer and grief communities. Please welcome Gracelyn and Melody.
Thank you for having us. Okay, so we're just going to pull up a slideshow for you real quick. We'll just go through what we do. So I am Melody, and this is my niece, Gracelyn, and this is our book that we created together called Beyond Grief, and the photographs from this book are being exhibited at Ma's House right now. Yeah, we work together, and we'll get a little bit more into what we do. So this is Gracelyn and I. I was 12 when she was born, so we grew up together, more like sisters than an aunt and niece team. But we have a very large, close-knit family, and many celebrations of years together. And it's an honor to be able to work with her and bring these books to life and to be able to share them with all of you. We're a multicultural family. We're both different races, I'm Filipino and Italian, and Gracelyn is also Filipino-Italian, mixed with Irish and Syrian and all sorts of different things. So we like to celebrate a lot, and we celebrate all of our traditions and all of our cultures, and we like to share that with everybody. So here's Gracelyn, and that is her dad, Chris, and he is who we honor every day, and why we started Luna Peak Foundation, and why he's our why, basically. And this is me as a child. I had leukemia when I was 6 years old, and I had 3 years of chemotherapy. And we touch on the cancer and the grief communities. Gracelyn's story is more about grief and losing her dad, and my story is more about my cancer journey, as well as how cancer and grief sort of go hand in hand. And yeah, everything we do is to help other people that are going through things that we've dealt with ourselves. So because of my cancer journey and knowing so many survivors over the years, I decided that I wanted to create a book that I wish I had when I was first diagnosed, because seeing other survivors is such a healing thing when you're first diagnosed, to be able to see that there is another side, that you can get through cancer and you can survive and have a nice life afterwards. So Beyond Remission was our very first book that we created together, and we photographed over 100 survivors of various cancers. We made sure the book was very diverse, people from all walks of life, different ages, different types of cancers, different backgrounds, and geographically different places. So you could definitely find yourself in this book if you were looking for somebody with the same type of cancer or the same age of diagnosis. We tried to make sure that it was very inclusive. So what we found was, when we photographed the survivors, there was a very special connection between survivors, seeing, someone else that has been through something similar to you. So everyone in these photos here are all different cancer survivors. And we noticed that even the survivors needed some healing and needed some hope. So just taking their photographs was a healing experience, and putting the book together and then them receiving their books, there were just so many different sides of healing that we experienced, that we wanted to open this up to different different people.
So we used Beyond Remission as a prototype. And, for me, I was not a cancer survivor, but seeing how the cancer survivors reacted to seeing Melody, and oftentimes having their stories honored for the first time and being able to talk about it and know that their story was being used, taking a page out of their story for someone else's healing was really important for them. And we just loved the whole process of it. And it kind of felt more like a movement than just a project in a book. And so we thought, okay, we're shedding a light on cancer and a very scary experience. Why don't we shed a light on grief? And this was 2 years into my grief journey of losing my dad. And I personally wanted to know how people navigated life after loss. Because for me, when my dad died, I thought, well, my life was over. The life I thought I was going to have is completely done. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And I knew there were a ton of grief survivors around me who were building a beautiful life, and they were still smiling and they were still laughing. And I wanted to get to that point too. And so we rolled up our sleeves and we iterated on the process of Beyond Remission and created a sister book, Beyond Grief. And so we explored an even darker topic, grief. And a lot of people don't really like to talk about it. It's really scary and it's really dark to a lot of people, but all of us will go through this in life. And we thought, let's open up this conversation and start this book. So we started grief sessions with people. And what was in these grief sessions were portraits. And so we did photography for this. And we also interviewed people on camera for this one. And we also took Polaroids of them. And we asked them to bring mementos that represented either their loss or their relationship, or their loved one, or them and the life that they've built after loss. And so we wanted to tackle all these different aspects to build a more three-dimensional view of what grief actually looks like. So Beyond Remission was, what does life after cancer look like? And this book is, what does life after loss look like? So we embarked on this journey, and we had a lot of beautiful moments that came out of it, especially using the medium of photography. We decided, that worked for Beyond Remission. It really helped people feel seen, and it helps people jump into your stories more as well. So here are a few of the portraits. So we have a lot of emphasis on the eyes and faces. And again, with the task of humanizing a topic like cancer or grief, we want to make sure that everyone does feel represented. And it's one thing to, read someone's story and to read their words. And it's another thing to know who is saying that to you. So it makes their stories a little bit more real, and it helps you jump into them more. So we thought, we need to show people what life after loss looks like. And we're going to show these eyes and faces, and we're going to show smiling faces. And we're really going to explore this topic and open up conversation. So another part of this project was actually taking people's Polaroids. And at first we weren't quite sure what we were going to do with these Polaroids. We were, taking photos on a digital camera as well. But we decided to come up with this idea of snapshots of life after loss. And so what we did at the end of each session was to take a Polaroid of each participant. And when we did that, we kind of got a glimpse of what their grief looked like at this exact time. So some people were 1 year out of loss, and some people were 66 years out of loss and everything in between. So we started taking these Polaroids, and one by one, after their sessions, we would tape them up to our wall. And we decided, well, how about we put these in chronological order of time passed since loss. So like I said, it's 1 to 66 years. There's just such a widespread and wide variety of people who shared their story in this project. And at first we thought, okay, well, maybe a few people will come to the table to share about the worst thing that happened in their life on camera. And it turns out that this was actually a unique opportunity that asked about their grief. And so this was really mutually beneficial. And so we were able to kind of highlight their stories, put them in chronological order. And even though grief is just such a vast experience, when we took a sliver and a snapshot of every single person's story across 80 stories, that actually forms such a 3D picture of what grief actually is. And of course, it's such a tall order to have somebody sit down and say, okay, well, can you sum up all of your grief journey? That's almost impossible. But knowing that and just taking that snapshot of what they look like today when we were interviewing them, it developed such a rich array and a rich, like, beautiful photo of what grief actually is. So we kind of iterated on this timeline a lot, and we had some participants, point to where their Polaroid is in the timeline. And it's really cool to be able to like revisit these even years later, because most of these interviews happened in 2018. So it took a couple years and a pandemic to finally edit this book. But this was kind of a fun component. So we would take 2 Polaroid photos of each person. So we got to keep one and they got to keep one. And so a lot of people have those as like a new memento, as part of this larger project. So another fun component of this was reviewing the mementos. And we always love to share bits and pieces of people's stories, and the memento stories are always a crowd pleaser just because they're so beautiful and there's so many incredible backstories. The items that people brought were so diverse and so interesting. And it could just be something as simple as the subway stop that you would take to get home. And that's just their reminder of what home is and what, the loss of their parents means to them. And sometimes it's a tattoo and wearable artwork of your mother's favorite flower. And this was actually my mom. And so widows will commonly wear their spouse's wedding ring on a chain and keep them close to their hearts. So we thought this was another awesome way to wear your memento and remind you of your loved one. Sometimes it is a scarf that your dad wore in his last few months of life and through cancer treatment, just to keep them warm. Story. And so this is one of our participants, and her dad passed away. His name is Eloy, like you can see on this painting smock. And what you see on these are all different colors. What these colors actually are memories of all the different artwork that he would put together. So he was an artist as a career. And with this participant, she can remember what all of the colors were from, like what pieces that he was making. And sometimes he would help her with school projects. And so she remembers like gold spray paint, and she can pinpoint exactly where those are on the smock. So we thought that was a really beautiful memento and story. And she continues to wear it now. And she is also an artist. And so she's able to add her own colors and memories to the story. And so there are 2 memories associated with this memento. And sometimes people brought really beautiful photos and portraits of a happy memory together. And the interesting part 2 of the story is that this participant's mom was fighting cancer and she was terminally ill. And so when she did stop treatment, she had actually arranged 4 secret gifts that and her sister would receive after she had died. And she coordinated these for various milestones. And so her and her sister had no idea they were ever going to get any of these gifts. And her mom arranged all of this. And so when this participant, Shanae, graduated from high school, she got her first milestone gift. And it was a watch that her mom used to wear when she was a teenager as well. And so all of them have their unique story and meaning behind why she's giving it to her and her sister at the exact times. And then Shanae was able to keep that secret for when her sister got the first milestone gift when she was pregnant with her first child. So a lot of really cool stories and mementos of celebration. And so, of course, there's so many additional memories and mementos even after her mom has passed, which we thought was very unique and very cool.
And I'll take over here. This is my father. This is Papa Ben, and he's holding a ukulele that it represents his grief from losing his father. And again, he lost his dad to cancer. So this brings it back to the beginnings of our, our journey of starting with Beyond Remission and interviewing cancer patients and cancer survivors, and how that connects with grief very often. And so, my dad lost his father to cancer 1 month before I was diagnosed with cancer. So it was kind of a hard time for him. And he never talked about his grief. Nobody ever asked him about the loss of his dad or how he was doing. I think there was a lot going on with me getting sick, but we never realized that he was actually sharing his grief with us all along, because he shared his music with us, and his music was from his father. And so the ukulele represents the music that his dad used to play for him and the Filipino songs that he would sing to him. And so, it leads back to our tradition of celebrating everything. And, even though it's something that's sad for him, it's a way for him to celebrate his father's life. And we try to keep that tradition alive now, and, continue to celebrate everything. And, this is just a simple memento of a photo of her son that she lost. And I think that photographs are a very common way for people to memorialize someone. And this is some artwork that was put into a book by her son. And then and bringing back cancer, this is a little girl that passed from cancer, and that's something that she drew for her brother. He was a soccer player, so she tried to recreate a soccer ball with his number on it. He was playing in college at the time. And I think it's really sweet to have somebody's handwriting. So having, her write, like just having a memory of her actual handwriting is very special. And this is something that he's obviously kept for a while, because you can see the date on top.
So we wanted to highlight this quote here. This is one of our participants who was 2 years out of losing her mentor. And it talks about how grief is always unique, and it's a combination of all these different factors. And before I really went into this topic, and before we started to compile all of these interviews, I had heard a lot as a griever that everyone grieves differently. And I think conceptually that's kind of, we can understand that, but to know what that actually meant was going through 80 people's stories and seeing just how differently everyone does grieve. And so we hope that this book becomes a tool of just learning about how different everyone's grief is, and that it's okay to grieve. So overall, we hope this is a tool that people can use to dive into their own grief, to reflect and relate, and also to learn about different types of loss as well. I've found myself, I'm 7 years out of loss now, but I find myself going to 2 years after loss. What did that look like? And, what does 52 years out of loss look like? And I dive into other people's stories, and it kind of grounds me, at least, in being able to, see how my grief might look at those stages, and just learn more about the process as somebody who's 5 decades down the line, and how they incorporate this into your life, because grief really does last forever. But overall, we hope this is a tool for people to feel seen and heard in their own grief, especially in a society that doesn't really like to talk about grief, even though it's everywhere. And a chance to dive into someone else's grief. And if you're a supporter and you have not experienced a close loss, you'll be able to dive into other people's stories and maybe have a good idea about what to expect, and also how to better support people in your life who are grieving. So we hope this is a useful tool to also start and continue conversations about grief, and to have more compassionate conversations around grief, and to, you know, boost understanding in this type of community, and also to break down stereotypes. Again, we can't stress enough how important it is to show diversity in age and gender, in the time period that you did lose someone, like what age group you're in then and what age group you're in now, and also ethnic background as well. We need representation, and much more representation in the space for both cancer and grief. So that's why we chose photography. But overall, we do hope that this book is used to show people firsthand that they're not alone.
And so from Beyond Remission and Beyond Grief, we've grown. So you can see some of our other books that we've created here. We're very proud of being able to offer our books in English and Spanish so that it's available to those that need it in a different language. We'd like to open it up to more. You know, we have children's books. We have books for siblings of children with cancer. We have books for adults, like workbooks through grief, workbooks for children in the hospital. A lot of the cancer stuff are things that I wish that I would have had. And we make sure, like in the children's book, we definitely, it's my little face. So it's nice to have, you know, a child out there not only seeing, you know, they're seeing different types of people that have cancer, because cancer doesn't care. So, you know, it hits all ages. And so they get to see, you know, someone that might look like them, which is something I did not have. So it's nice that I'm able to offer that now. Yeah, so that you can find our books. And, you know, from Beyond Remission, we actually started a nonprofit after that so that we could offer these books to other people. So here are some of the things we do as a nonprofit. So Luna Peak Foundation donates books to hospitals, to like people that are going through grief. We've offered them to churches. So the first little photo is a really special moment for me, where you can see that I'm reading my book to a little girl that's going through treatment. And she's actually about the same age I was, with the exact same cancer that I had. So that was a really special moment. And that's kind of another reason why we do these things. And, you know, we were able to offer her a little care package and the books free of charge, because of the nonprofit that we have. And, you know, that's Graceland, and that's Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, you know, we try to incorporate bringing books even when we're just on vacation, being able to offer them to different people. And yeah, we like to give these out. We have a beautiful group of supporters. And, you know, while you can purchase our books, when we do go to hospitals, we try to offer those for free.
So we also learned that in starting online community spaces, that people really need laughter when they're going through cancer, when they're going through grief. And so we kind of started this workbook trend, and that's kind of like what started all the rest of our, you know, different types of workbooks that we offer to different people in the family who are affected by cancer and for grief. And so we started with a grief workbook, and we started these pages, Funeral Week Bingo, that actually started on an Instagram post. We just kind of put it out there with some very silly, relatable moments of what you might experience, awkward moments that you might experience during a funeral. And so we have people play bingo with us, and we decided to add this to the workbook. And then another page that we have is Let's Talk About Them. And this is touching on the fact that, again, people are rarely asked about their grief. And that's a really unfortunate thing, because just because our loved ones died, that doesn't mean that we don't want to still talk about them. They're still very much present in our lives. And so this page is an intentional moment that asks people, what's their favorite color? What is their nickname? You know, what are some of their inside jokes? What did you guys like to do together? These are all things that I wish someone would ask me about my dad. And so, you know, we create these memory pages. We have pages that make people laugh. We have some word games. Some of it's silly and some of it's serious, but I think that also kind of captures what grief is. Sometimes it's a little serious and sometimes it's a little silly. So we try to put together some resources that help people laugh. And these tend to be really popular popular for us in book sales, because I think it's an easy thing that you can gift to someone else. And it's okay if you don't know what to give to a griever, if you're a supporter and you haven't experienced this, but take it from people who have been through it. We've put together these resources, and we hope that it makes people laugh and smile, because there's still a lot of celebration, even in grief and loss. We've also started to do workshops, and we will be doing one of these on the 17th of March when we come out to Ma's house. But we love sharing a lot of the aspects of our projects with people and helping them express themselves and write, and to share about their loved ones and their grief and what their grief looks like today. So we love to do Polaroid workshops with people, writing workshops with people, and also we help people share their stories. We've started a publishing division within our nonprofit, and so we also help people tell their stories and publish their own stories too.
So this is how you can get in touch with us. So jot it down or take a screenshot so that you're able to follow us. We have our different websites there that you can find us at. lunapeakfoundation.org will link you to everything that you need. And there's the grief division there and the cancer division. And please, shoot us an email and let us know, how Beyond Grief affected you. And if you were able to go to Ma's house and see this, we'd love to see photos or what your thoughts are, and what you took from it. And we just want to say thank you to Ma's house. It's really special, and we feel really honored to be a part of their beautiful little space there. And we're excited to come out in person next month. And if you are in New York, come when we're there so that we can meet you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Should we stop sharing?
Thank you so much. That was amazing to learn more about you and the wonderful, important work that you're doing. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Sorry, we just got excited. We saw the chat.
Oh, yeah, no, I just thank you again. I'm always moved by the work you do. Like, Gracelyn and I had the awesome opportunity to meet at grief camp a while ago. And just every time I see, the work that you're putting out into the world, I'm always in awe. Like you said, it's a lot of things that grievers, like myself included, wish that we had. And to see not only that, we can all participate in this now, but that grievers on the horizon will also have more resources available is wonderful. And especially, how that overlaps with the cancer community. So thank you for the amazing work you do. Thank you for sharing it with Ma's house. We're so honored to have it up on our walls and can't wait for you guys to come out here in March. I had a couple questions to dig a little bit deeper. And one of them was actually about this process of how the cancer and grief communities come together. So, a lot of times there's the really, heart aching moment of realizing that something is terminal. And then the aftermath of knowing that cancer was a part of that now grief journey. But sometimes that's not what happens in cancer. And juggling both of those communities where there is overlap, but it's not always like this definite thing. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about how you as an organization really build that support into offering that for those who it is an overlap, and also being conscious of those that, are not going to go down that path and are not trying to, sit too much in the worry of going down that path.
So you want me to take this? So it's definitely that has been a concern for us, especially like if we are, we've done different events for cancer, and we always wonder, should we bring our grief books? Should we not bring our grief books? So we definitely have them with us kind of to the side. If we know, if someone says, my mom has 12 months to live, then we know that, anticipatory grief is there, and maybe we want to reach out and stay in touch with them and chat with them a little bit about it. But of course, we don't want to put that in somebody's face that is actively fighting cancer and, has a 50% chance of survival and doesn't want to think about that. So we do definitely, it is a fine line, and we try to balance that a little bit. But even in the cancer world, for those of us that survive, grief is still a very large part of it. I mean, I can tell you from being a 6-year-old, I lost most of my friends as a child. So grief was a part of my life, even though I didn't pass. So I think that having those items of, and especially to the kids and to siblings and people that the world, I think it's good to have, this will reach if you need it, but not if you're in your face if you don't need it. But yeah, so definitely, the grief world is part of the cancer world, whether you are, actively dying or not. It unfortunately it's around you.
And so much of what we do is honest. It's tackling these topics, but leading with honesty about how hard these are. Yeah, there are highs and lows, and there are ways to not feel as alone during the worst of it. So we hope that at least in being honest, that we can help tackle these topics and show what it looks like, and just really be transparent and provide resources that actually help people. But we won't know how to actually help people until we get these stories and we hear about the gaps in support and where people actually want to lead this conversation.
That's so true. And I love your point about, the grief that's involved with cancer, even when you're a survivor, because I think in the podcast you had mentioned, the Moss House podcast, you had mentioned that you, you know, you change as well. And there's this new frontier in your life in the same way that there's a new frontier in every griever's life. It's a different experience. So thank you for mentioning that. And kind of building off of that, because both of you have such really close personal connection to these topics, I know myself also as a death worker, that the personal and then the work aspect of it being so tightly knit, it can be really difficult to navigate that and hold space for your own experience. So I'm wondering from both of you, like, how do you make time and space to honor the feelings that come out from your lived experience in the work that you do with others who share that?
It's not easy. To be completely honest with you, it's not easy. I mean, I have to take moments for myself, and I'm also a mother of 3 children, so I have a lot of different things going on. So I have to make sure that there's space for me, and I think just breathe. That's like my biggest thing. Is like I always try to take a moment for myself, and just in the car at a stoplight, like just take a moment, before I go on to the next thing. Like honor where you're at for that minute, take a breath, and then I move on.
I try to take a page out of her book. She's been on a healing journey for 40 years this year. She's in remission for 40 years, which is amazing and incredible. But yeah, I absolutely need my grief friends, and I need the stories in this book. I need to know that, there are different ways to cope, and here's how other people do it. And especially with running an online community with grief, I think I have a much higher tolerance than the average person to listen to others' grief. I love it. I love hearing other people's stories, but still, when it comes around to my dad days, which I call because my dad died the day before his birthday. So it's those 2 days back to back that I always have to take a beat and kind of retreat a bit. And just 2 days out of the year, I think I'm allowed to have my own grief days where it's just about me and my dad, and honoring my dad, especially on his birthday. So I definitely need to take time and space and to log off sometimes. And of course, to just have those friends, especially our friendship, just, creating in the death spaces, it's really difficult. And the challenge for me is mostly just how people don't like to talk about it, even though it is kind of everywhere, and there's a way to embrace it without it being negative or a scary thing. And so, I look to mentors like you who are able to have these conversations and be so death positive. And, days when I need that extra encouragement, I can talk to you. We don't even need to explain things. It's just that understanding when you have someone who can relate it's everything.
That community really does make a difference. So appreciate you right back, and just, love this calling out that you do need and deserve to take that time for your own experiences as well. I think a lot of times when we're in these kind of avenues of work, we think that it's all about self-sacrifice, and really it is important to take that time for ourselves so that we are able to fully show up and really hold people when they're in their vulnerable moments with us. And to that note about these really vulnerable moments, you went through this process of doing these detailed interviews with everyone, and went through, formal portrait sessions and video interviews. But then you also had this snapshot element, which we have as an interactive wall at Ma's house. So folks can add their own snapshots, but you took these Polaroids and you asked people 3 words to describe their grief right now. And I think it's so interesting, in contrast to the long format interviews and portraits, to have something so quick and so I think more intuitive about their experience. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about how you got to bring that aspect into the interview process, and also maybe some of the things you noticed about how it was different from the longer interviews.
You want to take it?
Sure. Well, we are a family of sociologists, so I'll start with that. We are very much influenced by my sister and Graceland's mom. And so Linda, she has her PhD in sociology, and we kind of followed suit. And I have my bachelor's in sociology, and Graceland has a bachelor's and a master's. And, we want these stories. We want to know about you. But having just 3 quick words to describe it kind of puts people on the spot. By the way, like it's so quick, and the things that people spit out so quickly. And we noticed that it was so different. Like, not many people said the same. Some overlapped a little bit, but for the most part, and they would say things like that were happy, and that was very interesting to us. But the reason we did 3 was it's succinct. It makes you think very quickly, and you don't have too much time to think too much into it. It really is the first thing that comes to mind. So I think that's why we did the 3. I mean, do you have anything to add to that?
We asked about 20 questions during these interviews with people. Typically it was like an hour to an hour and a half long. Typically the most anyone's ever talked about their grief, shockingly. But yeah, we asked people to describe their grief, and I think that's a big question. And then from a lot of their answers, I think that kind of helped them summarize it down into those 3 words. And we didn't want to just give them 1 word to choose. That would be way too difficult. But in giving people the opportunity to share 3, we thought maybe that would give someone a chance to include negative words, include positive words, because grief is so vast that it gives them the opportunity to choose like 3 different types of feelings or words. What's cool about this question is that when we do workshops, I've heard feedback from people who are like 1 year, 2 years out of loss, and definitely from our grief camp workshop that we did. One of our friends, who was actually just a couple months after loss, did this, and we had everybody place their Polaroids in their own chronological order on a new timeline, if you will. And so I remember this person saying, okay, well, I'm just 6 months out of loss. But I was hearing people at 25 years after loss saying it still feels very fresh. And for that, it was validation. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that, sometimes it can feel daunting, like, oh, I'm still going to deal with this in 25 years. But for him, it was more of something that was normal and relatable. And it almost made it more digestible for him to think, all right, this is okay if this is going to last forever. I'm going to incorporate it into my life. And 25 years later, it's still going to be a part of me. And so I think that was kind of helpful to see, like, here's where I am on the Polaroid timeline, but where do people feel differently at different parts too? So it was just kind of an interesting thing that sort of developed, and it's easy to kind of join into that exercise too.
Yeah, it makes for a quick visual.
Absolutely. I mean, folks have really jumped into participating so far. I think almost everybody who's come in to see the show has added a Polaroid to the wall, and they'll be like taking their selfies in front of the Polaroids behind them, which is really special to see. And you're right, I think it is interesting to have space for both the positive and the negative. I think Susan's had noted both the word painful, but also had said rejuvenated me, which is so interesting because I've experienced a lot of that too, where there's things that you learn about yourself through the grieving journey that sometimes do result that way, and it's unexpected. So thank you for creating space for that. And I also noticed when I participated in your workshop, the thing that surprised me was I know our kind of shared nervousness that, after a certain point in time, people will stop thinking that it's okay or acceptable for your grief to be relevant, because, oh, it's been so long. But seeing how many people were ahead of me on that timeline and how many years it had been, it really gave this kind of sense of both this bittersweet comfort of like, okay, no, there is a group of people out there who will still see and acknowledge my grief when I get to that point, when I'm at their 25-year mark. So thank you for that. And I'm also wondering, based on some of those nuggets, if there's anything else that's throughout this whole process surprised you from people who are either earlier or further on in their journey, when you're going through all these stories. What has really stuck out to you as being something you weren't expecting?
For me, the biggest thing is how many people said that's the first time anyone's asked me that question. Especially, we had a family friend that we interviewed, and he was the one that was 66 years out of loss, and nobody had really asked him about losing his mom when he was a child. Shocking to me, especially because we're talkers and we're storytellers, and we like to hear people's stories. So for us, it was kind of shocking that nobody had asked him, but also he was a family friend and we had never asked him. So that was interesting to me. And hearing from the men, I think also it seemed to be like a lot of the men had not been asked about their feelings.
And that's also with Beyond Remission as well, which is also why it's so important for us to show, so much gender diversity too. What has shocked me the most about creating Beyond Grief is how much celebration is in it. And I think I was in such a broken place when we started interviewing people that I didn't know what to expect when starting this project. And, most people who we interviewed were further along in their grief journeys. And so I think each one of them became a role model for me. I learned something new in every single interview. And I thought, oh, I want to be like that 5 years into my grief. I want to be like that 50 years into my grief. But there was a lot of joy in it. And I didn't see that one coming. And I think it was easier to see the joy in creating Beyond Remission, because these are all stories of how people have triumphed over cancer. And for the metastatic people who are part of it, and they're, winning each day and taking it a day at a time. And there was a lot of celebration in that. And for Beyond Grief, I just assumed this was going to be kind of sad. And I think pretty quickly into the interviews, I think it was even the second interview where we asked people to describe themselves. And this was kind of just an icebreaker question. What are 3 words to describe yourself? And I remember this person who was 15 years out of losing her dad said she was happy. And I was like, oh, okay. So, okay, happy is on the menu for how I can develop in my grief journey. Like, that's wonderful. And even though I didn't quite understand it for myself back then, I can, all of it's coming into focus now. But you could see even in these photos, they're smiling faces. And that's what we want to show. There's still a lot of joy even through this. And that's a lot of what Melody has brought to the table, especially in her 4 decades of living after cancer, that there's still so much to celebrate, no matter the that you're going through. So definitely the celebration aspect of it was such a pleasant surprise. And I think even going through these books now, you can cover even just this very light way to tackle such a dark topic. So I'm very happy that there was a lot of joy in it.
There really is, and it shows that balance of like the space to be honest when something is just really awful, and also the space to be honest when you're excited and having a really wonderful experience at that moment, and it's not like it doesn't negate the rest of your grief. So thank you for again making that space for all kinds of honesty in loss and in cancer. It's really wonderful to see. And I have a couple more questions, but I did want to leave space for anyone in the chat to reach out and ask a question. So if folks have any questions, feel free to unmute and chime in, or if you're more comfortable typing it out, I can read it, whatever you prefer.
Hello, I wanted to ask how you came up with the name Luna Peak. Oh.
So, you know, Luna it's a female run company. It was really important for us that, you know, everyone that helped us out, as well as us, you know, having a female company. So Luna is like that female aspect of it. And then Peak is sort of like, for me, I'm always trying to reach the highest peak and finding where I am and what the highest peak is that day, because every day is, you know, you're a different person every day. So sometimes the peak can be here and I'm going to reach it, and sometimes the peak can be here and I'm going to reach it. So Luna Peak is just helping people reach their highest highs. Lost you?
Somehow you got unpinned, but
Oh, okay, but we're still here.
oh,
Okay.
you're back.
As long as we're still here, we just disappeared for a minute. Yeah. So
Anyone else have a question
basically,
they'd like to ask?
I'm going to put you guys on the spot because you put me on the spot when you interviewed me. So what is the 1 to 2 things that's been most shocking? You talked about things bubbling up, but if you had to boil it down to 2 things, what would you say is the most shocking things you've come across in this journey with Luna Peak?
for me, the connection between grief survivors and cancer survivors, any survivors, when I would meet, we were taking photographs of cancer survivors, and they didn't know that I was a survivor. They just thought we were photographers. And we were in the studio, and they just think we're professional photographers taking their photos. And then, you know, as they're a little bit uncomfortable, and I would say, you know, or Graceland would announce, you know, one of us would say that I was a cancer survivor, the immediate change in their faces, because there is a connection. And all of a sudden they were more comfortable. So that was the most shocking for me, because I've been surrounded by survivors since I was little, and a lot of people aren't. And so when they found another survivor, it was instant hugs. Instant connection. So for me, that was the most shocking on the cancer side of things.
I would say similar to that dynamic, it's also just the vulnerability that people allowed for in coming to the table for this. I mean, every day I'm shocked that 80 people came to the table to share their grief stories. Oftentimes the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And I think it just took so much bravery. And I know a lot of people were grief experts already who were used to telling their story. And some people had never shared about it in their whole life. Like our family friend who was 66 years at a loss and lost his mom at age 11, and, you know, just kind of quietly incorporated it into his life. But for that whole spectrum of people to come to the table purely to help make someone else's journey a little bit less lonely, that will always floor me.
And we love your story. We tell it a lot.
Yes.
I love all of the stories you've given us. Actually, the book's right there along with my emotion wheel. I keep it really present so that I can use it whenever I need it. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I noticed that you know, with the timeline and the pictures, the timeline starts 1 year out. So is that what you recommend? Like, what if it's only a few months? What if it's a week? You know, do people, is it too raw, do you find, for people to talk about it?
I don't think it's ever too early to start this conversation. And while the first participant was 1 year out of loss to share her story for this book, I think, you know, if I had this book immediately after the funeral, I think I would have felt a little bit less crazy for all the wide range of emotions I was about to experience. And I think there's always so much pressure on grievers to behave a certain way, to get over something and get over their grief on a certain timeline. And I really wish that didn't exist for them, because grief is already so awful. We don't need people to pressure us through any part of it. And so we hope that even if someone's just a few months out of loss and they receive this book, they can go through and find just one story, even whatever they can handle at that time, to jump into someone's story and to know, you know, maybe they don't feel like they can survive in this moment, but they can skip 52 years ahead of time for someone of that same exact type of loss and know, okay, this person did it, I'm going to do it too. I'm going to find my own way. It doesn't have to be exactly the way that each one of these participants has done it, but hopefully it'll inspire them to know that it's okay for them to carve their own path and that it's okay to grieve. That's kind of the biggest thing. So we hope that, you know, even if it's a new griever and they're going through one page at a time, or if they do one page in a year, that hopefully there's something that they can learn and feel better about after having learned about someone else's journey.
And I've definitely gifted this to people right at loss. I find giving this is better than giving flowers, because I do remember some of the hard times of having to throw out flowers that died after your person has died. So it's just like another thing you have to do. So, you know, Beyond Grief can be on your shelf. And if you feel like opening it, you can. And if you just want to look at the title, I think just the title itself is healing, because that's what we're trying to do is, you know, get through your grief. So, yeah, I don't think that there is, you know, a right time for somebody to have this book.
I was just curious. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing project and your stories. But I was just curious if there were any stories that felt like a connecting chord to those you've grieved. I know you mentioned that this project was built specifically to honor your dad, or at least the grief extension of it. But I was wondering if there were kind of little reminders that felt like you were being in touch with him, or if there were sort of connecting chords. I'm sure all of the stories do feel like that to some extent, but if there were any magical moments that felt that way.
Yeah, I think there is something relatable in every single one of the stories. And either that helped me through my own grief and feelings, or it kind of reminded me of my dad too. There were so many beautiful mementos that people would share, especially for the handwritten notes. A lot of those, you know, kind of, it's an instant tearjerker, I think, when you see somebody's handwritten note, or, you know, someone saying, "Love, Dad." And that's kind of how your dad always would sign things. And there are a lot of really beautiful moments like that in this project. Yeah, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, there are a lot of reminders of, you know, how the mementos can bring up emotions. And, you know, for me, obviously the children with cancer that were lost was especially difficult for me to listen to and to, you know, transcribe and to, you know, look like Photoshop and look at those things. But yeah, I mean, I think you can find yourself in every story for sure.
I especially liked how people would convert a lot of their mementos and wear things of their loved ones as well. And I always found that difficult because my dad was 6'3". And so I'm like, oh, what can I wear of his things? And we actually had some of his belts converted so that we could wear them too. But, you know, people would repurpose things and wear them and feel closer to their loved one. And that's something that we learned from this project that we've now incorporated into our grief too.
Yeah, and I have a lot of ideas of things to do. So yeah, no, definitely there's a connection with everybody.
That's so wonderful. I know I definitely learned something from everybody's story. in that book and had the great honor to be included in it, and to also give it a read through when, you know, it was the early stages and it's like, oh, what's happening with this? So just really inspiring to get all those like little pieces of what could be incorporated to be more comforting, more healing, and find ways to keep moving forward and build this new reality. So thank you so much for all the amazing, impactful work that you have done, that you are doing, that you're continuing to do in the future. And we are getting close to time here. So I just wanted to remind everybody to, if you haven't yet, or if you'd like to spend a little bit more time, to come see the show at Ma's house through March 25th, and to also visit us to meet Luna Peak in person on March 17th. They'll be here leading one of their really amazing interactive workshops and looking closer at the grief workbook and seeing, you know, how there's tools in that, as well as listening to these stories and learning from these people who have been there. Also, what are ways that you can participate and jump in? So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Luna Peak. And we hope you have a great rest of your night, and to see you soon at Ma's house.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining.